Hi guys, Rikir here. So we're here back with Amnesia Academy Part 5. This week we're going to be covering grid management basics. So manipulating grid in order to win Vorpal is one of the key ways to win in Uni. In order to get more grid, you will win more cycles and eventually get Vorpal more times than your opponent, which is really important because Vorpal is very important for turning the tides of the game or using it to extend combos and such. So this week we're mostly going to focus on how to generate grid and ways that you can lose grid. But the general idea is that if you're playing Uni, you want to focus on doing actions that build a lot of grid and avoid actions that lose a lot of grid. But there's a lot of contextual situations in which you might have to do one over the other based on what's happening. Like if you're getting pressured, you might want to give up grid in order to force function if your force function is a defensive force function. But for the most part, we're going to go into that into later weeks. For now, we're just going to focus purely on what builds grid and what doesn't. So passively, you will generate grid over time. So if both characters are just on screen, they will build grid as the TS cycle counts down. As you can see, you're slowly generating grid, very small amounts, and the rate of that generation is dependent on where you are on screen. So if your opponent is closer to the corner, then you have the grid advantage in that you will build grid faster than your opponent. You can see I already have Gordeau already has 2 blocks of grid while Byakuya barely has 1. And the situation is the same if you yourself are in the corner. So say Gordeau's in the corner. Now since his back is closer to the corner, Byakuya is now building more grid. So positioning is really important in Uni as well. So you don't want to put yourself in the corner. You want to put your opponent in the corner because that will passively generate you more grid without having to without you having to take riskier options. You just gain more grid than your opponent because you are in the better spot on the screen. Other ways to build grid are to just doing positive actions, like aggressive actions. So for example, just moving forward towards your opponent and that like dashing or jumping will build a lot of grid just over time. It's kind of like Tension and Guilty Gear, in which doing positive actions will increase your meter gain. In this case, it's grid gain. So doing positive actions like dashing forward, walking forward, jumping forward towards your opponent and being aggressive will build grid. And the counter is kind of true as well. If you're being not as aggressive and walking away towards your opponent, you will slowly lose grid as well. As you can see, if I dash forward and then start walking back slowly, I slowly lose grid and give more to Byakuya. Also, it joins in with the fact that with the passive grid generation, I'm moving my back closer to the corner, and Byakuya is closer to mid-screen than I am, so that he builds more grid, I build less grid. You also have mechanics that build grid, that generate grid actively, like concentration 5D. If you hold 5D, you will start generating grid at a certain rate. That rate increases as the longer you hold it. So if you just hold it for 30 frames, the rate increases but starts draining meter. As you can see, Gordeau is losing meter right now. But it also has the effect of draining grid from your opponent. So let me just quickly give Byakuya a bunch of grid so that it's more obvious. So yeah, let's give him 12. So he has 12 grid blocks. Okay, now I'm gonna start draining it. You can see how quickly the grid starts draining on your opponent if you start burning meter on your concentrate. This effect doesn't happen if you don't have meter. So you have 0 meter. Oh, oh, actually no, it does. No, just a little bit. It's just not as fast. It's the problem. But if you're burning meter, then the grid steal is a lot faster. Another important thing to note is that for every instance in which you're holding the 5D, you are building grid, so just tapping it will build small amounts of grid. So what I tend to like to do is I like to, while dash blocking, instead of immediate dash blocking, I might dash forward, tap grid, to just gain a little bit of grid, and then block. So that's one small way you can sneak in some active grid gain and stopping your momentum. When I'm playing Chaos, this is very evident because after my reverse speeds, Chaos is usually doing nothing while Doll is doing something, so I will just stop and quickly build some grid while moving forward. So that's concentration for the most part. If both players are concentrating at the same time, usually the player with more meter will out-concentrate the other person. in most cases, but you also have to factor in where you are on the screen as well because of the passive generation of grid. Other ways to generate grid include Assault. I should get rid of Byakuyo's grid. Assault will automatically generate, sorry, not automatically, will actively generate half a block of grid every time you assault at your opponent. On top of the passive generation of grid that you get from moving forward as well. So just the action of Assault builds half a block of grid, and then usually the motion itself will build the other half of the block. So if you're in a situation where you might want to move towards your opponent quickly and also build grid, just assaulting is a good way to build grid, and jumping in the air, like doing air assault, just ways to move towards your opponent to quickly gain an extra block of grid as well. Shielding is another way you can build grid, so 1D, 4D. I already covered this kind of last week, where if you shield something, you get +1 grid blocks. So let me just kind of demonstrate. So it works for both forms of shielding, both green and blue shielding. So blue, and then green. Oh, I missed. So green, yeah, blue. Sorry, no, that was green. Yeah, both forms of shielding will generate the same amount of grid. The one thing to keep in mind is that if you miss a green shield, I didn't miss there. Yeah, you lose grid. So if you miss green shield a lot, then you will very quickly lose grid. You lose 1 block of grid for every whiffed green shield. So you gotta be careful about your green shields. You have to make sure that they're on point. Otherwise, you end up losing your grid and you give more grid to your opponent. So that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, hitting your opponent will also build a small amount of grid as well. And blocking also builds grid. So if your opponent is running up to you and doing a block string, then just blocking will generate grid over time as well. So that's one way you can generate grid. Certain characters have specific moves that can build grid or generate grid or to take grid from your opponent. The most famous one is Assimilation. Gordo Assimilation will take 1 block of grid from your opponent. Oops. Oh my gosh, okay, you put 2 1 for it. Yeah, so a famous example of Assimilation. Other examples include Byakuyo's webs. Let's get the recording out. Yeah, so his webs can steal grid as well. There are other characters that have moves that can build grid. Eltnum Perfect Reload will build 1 block of grid on success for the perfect reload, not regular reload. Katsuki, his force function, if he's successful, also builds a block of grid, but it also costs grid, so it's more of a... he gets back what he put in, basically. So there's also other examples. I think Yuzu, one of her stance cancels involves... I think if she gets a stance cancel right, she gets grid back. I can't remember, I'm not a Yuzu player, so... But there are other characters that have specific grid gaining options that you might want to look into when you're playing against those characters. So I mostly covered actions that generate grid. Some actions that lose you grid are negative options, and by that I mean negative movement options. So things that move you away move you away from your opponent will lose you grid. So I already covered walking back. Will passively reduce your grid generation, but also backdashing will. I should get myself on the block, so this is obvious. So let's get myself. Yeah, so backdashing loses you half a block of grid every time you do it. So if you're a player who likes to backdash a lot to abuse the invincibility, then you have to be mindful about your grid as well, because if you're trying to backdash out block strings, you're also losing grid. And you might want to consider when is a good time to to backdash. If you're looking where the cycle is right now, it's kind of late in cycle. Backdashing here is really not a good idea. If you just want, you're giving your opponent a higher chance of winning Vorpal, but backdashing earlier, not too bad usually. Teching also has Ukemi, ground tech and air tech options also affect grid gain. They actively give you grid or lose you grid. So in the case of back teching, let's get Byakuyo to knocking down. Okay, back teching will lose you grid. Actually, I should give myself more grid again, so that's obvious. Yeah, so back teching on the floor will lose you a block of grid. whereas neutral teching immediately will not lose your grid. So usually when you're in a situation where you need to manage grid, you want to consider if you want to back tech if to get out of their Oki versus to neutral tech and not lose grid. So you do need to make those kind of decisions sometimes. So let me just do that. Yeah, so back teching lost me a block of grid. And I'm also moving away towards my opponent, so the passive generation is in their favor now. So you gotta be really careful about when you back tech versus neutral tech. So you gotta make those kind of decisions sometimes based on the situation. Like if your opponent's doing like really scary Oki, like Carmine or something, and you want to back tech, like if Carmine's sending a trap down and you want to back tech to get out of it, then you might want to give up the grid in order to get away out of that Oki situation. Being thrown also loses you grid. I kind of covered that last week as well. If you're thrown, you lose grid. If your throw gets teched, you also lose grid. So let me show you. Let me get Byakuya to tech. So Byakuya tech my throw, I lose grid, and he gains grid instead. So you gotta be careful about when you throw your opponent as well, because if they don't get thrown, it's out of your favor now. Also, they're +8, which I covered last week. So you gotta be careful about when you throw your opponent as well. But one interesting situation is that if you're near the end of the cycle and you try to throw somebody, you will instantly get some grid because you got the throw technically. But then if your opponent techs it, you will immediately lose it. So there is a short period where you gain extra grid, but then you lose it instantly. So let's put the cycle at 90%, and then just make the almost one. So actually no, it'll be clearer if I do put him at advantage. Yeah, I'm not getting it. 2. I think that'll be enough. Okay, I'm not getting this. I think it needs to be a little closer, like if I had a 95, but I'm not gonna keep trying to get that example out. But yeah, some interesting situations where when you throw an opponent might matter. Other things that lose you grid is force function. Force function automatically, by default, costs 2 block. Oh no, it's 1. Okay, 1 block of grid. Some characters. No. I think some characters have. No, my bad. That's my bad. I was thinking the wrong thing. But yeah, Akatsuki, I already told you, his force function builds you back 1 block of grid, so if you successfully parry something with Akatsuki, he gets back to 1 block. But otherwise, most characters, it costs 1 block to use force function. And depending on what, like, some characters need force function in combos, so you gotta be considerate about whether or not you want to go for a combo route that uses force function, because you will lose grid mid-combo, and then potentially give it to your opponent while they're being comboed if you use force function in your combo, so you gotta be careful. One other thing that I want to quickly mention is that certain characters, from UniL to UniST, there was a change in which the longer a combo is, the person getting hit will passively build grid. So what that means is that if you're playing against a character that has really long combos, let's say Eltnum, so let me just pull out Eltnum quickly. So Eltnum has pretty long combos, so you will notice that during this combo that Byakuya will start building a small amount of grid. Yeah, it's starting now. Yeah, so while you're getting hit during a really long combo, you will build up to 2 blocks of grid. So if you're playing a character that has really long combos, you might want to shorten the combo quickly so that grid generation doesn't kick in. In the case of Eltnum, she can perfect reload, so she gets some of that grid back during her long combos. That kind of balances out for her. But other characters, you might want to stop the combo early just so that doesn't happen. Also, while you're comboing somebody and the combo's really long, the grid cycle also slows down. That's another change from UniL to UniST that was added. So that kind of helps characters. That prevents characters with really long combos from cheating the cycle by just putting your opponent in a really long combo, and now they have no control over grid anymore. So that lets the combo play out, and then you guys get back to neutral, and then you can make decisions. Your opponent, the person being comboed, can make decisions that influence grid. So those are most of the basic actions that can build grid or lose grid. I didn't really get into a lot of more contextual stuff, but that's kind of what I will be going in later weeks. But yeah, the basic premise is that you want to do actions that build a lot of grid most of the time and avoid actions that lose grid. So that's the basic premise. If you have any questions, please DM me or post in the YouTube comments, or wherever you find this, you can message me. So, yep, that'll be it for today. Thank you for watching, and please see us next week.